ahead and introduce Chris. So Chris, he's been part of Atlassian support team for over 2 years. He supports JIRA and GreenHopper. He's got a strong passion for solving problems for customers. And before Atlassian, he worked at support at both Apple and Hewlett-Packard on Tier 1 and 2 support roles. So he's definitely been in the support world for quite a while. And when he's not working, he likes mobile development, and he definitely likes gaming. So with that, Chris, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. All right, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, I suppose, over there. As Morgan said, I'm Chris, and we're going to talk today about Agile scale. So we're just going to talk about some best practices for using GreenHopper within, especially within large organizations, and some of the things that we've learned here in support from what customers are experiencing. So we'll just quickly cover over what's new in GreenHopper 6. We'll take a look at the board design and usage that we'd recommend you'd try and aim for when you're putting together the new boards, and we'll look at how you can cut up the workload that you've got in those boards to make them a little bit more focused. We'll also look at some of the things that you should look out for when upgrading GreenHopper. If you're on an earlier version, you want to get on to 6.0, then there's a couple of things that we want to make you aware of and make sure that you don't get caught on or surprised by. And we'll also take a brief look at how Atlassian has been using GreenHopper, especially in our larger teams here. So without further ado, let's have a quick look at what's new in GreenHopper 6. So GreenHopper traditionally has been our Agile management tool that sits as a plugin within JIRA for those that I guess haven't had any experience with it yet. Now, what that means is it actually has access to all the issues within JIRA. So any data that JIRA has stored there, GreenHopper can use, and we use this to present that same data in a new light and sort of help Agile teams enforce Agile policies and methodologies. With 6.0, what we've done is we've really helped to sort of get a lot more stringent in those Agile guidelines, really help teams to be truly Agile in a way that that previously we were getting close to, but now we're getting to as close as we possibly can to what we believe is the true Agile there. So if you're new, basically, as I've just said, sorry, it's a JIRA plugin. It's also a reloadable plugin since JIRA 4.4 introduced reloadable plugins. Now this is something that is good, but it can also be something to be that you'll need to be careful of, because it is quite a big plugin. It is our biggest plugin that we have. And so it means that if you are just going to upgrade it on a live instance, it's something that's possible to do, being a reloadable plugin, but you should be aware of some of the processes that it can go through during an upgrade. And it also updates via the UPM, so you'll be able to get notifications of when the latest bug fixes are out through that. So as for the new GreenHopper, what we've got in there is we've got basically this new system where we're building new boards rather than using the previous per project based boards, the planning board and task board. We've now gone to a new system where you define what your boards are going to be built from. It's filter based, so you can actually start with a list of your own projects, or you could start with your own custom filter, and then from there you can heavily customize each of the boards to your own sort of needs and wants. This allows people to get a lot more control over what they want, and doesn't leave you with sort of surplus boards that nobody's using. And as you can see, it's a lot easier to define how your sort of which projects you're going to end up with just by selecting the projects you want and then throwing them straight onto a new board. We've also got some interactive charts. So this is something that we previously had. We had a lot of charts, and a lot of customers have enjoyed the charts that we've had previously. But we've taken it a step further by actually rendering them in JavaScript in the UI. And now they're actually completely interactive charts that lets you hover over certain elements to get more information. And for the Kanban charts, you can actually zoom in and out of those extra details. So you could look at different timelines, or zoom in for details, or zoom back out to get the big picture. We've also had a look at the speed there. So the actual the performance that we've had in the previous classic GreenHopper is something that we've received a lot of feedback on. So one thing we did is, especially around ranking and the board load times, we've changed that a lot. So we've improved the performance, and if we compare what sustained ranking was like on the old boards to the new ones, then we can actually find that we've gone from a sustained ranking period, response time rather, the peak response time would hit nearly 1700 milliseconds because what it would need to do is actually go through and optimize those indexes before it would allow you to rank anymore. Now, because we fixed that up, sustained rank times on our test instances are dropping down well below to, the peaks are hitting at most 34 milliseconds. Because we no longer need to do that optimization, we can just keep ranking without having those pauses and those chugs. So on top of that, we've looked at the performance of both the actual board load times as well. So the ranking is faster and does use less resources because of that lack of optimization. But for the actual data that we're pulling it straight out of the indexes now. So we're using Lucene not only through JQL, but also we've dropped down a level and gone directly to the Lucene index, which has been a good learning experience for the GreenHopper team. And it means that they've been able to pull up a lot more data that previously they didn't have access to and had to go right back to the database to get. It also means that now we can actually go global with all of our scopes. So this means that no longer is it per project. Previously we were ranking within a project only, but now we're actually cross-project for everything. You just take any kind of filter that you want. It could be every issue in your instance, although I would never recommend that, or it could be a series of 3 projects or a very custom filter, and you can actually go and just start ranking and building boards based off of those issues. And finally, we are catering to all Agile teams at last. So we've got both Scrum and Kanban boards or presets for those boards. For those teams that are out there that are running either Kanban or Scrum and have wanted one or the other and haven't really found what they wanted with our previous boards. On top of that, we can also go to an advanced mode where you can actually define any filter you want and really sort of get into the nitty-gritty of customizations there. The classic boards are actually going to remain there for the foreseeable future. We don't have any plans to remove them immediately, but we will consistently review these plans and see what we're doing there. We've actually moved them under the classic tab, under the Agile tab in GreenHopper 6. And they'll only be receiving critical bug fixes from here on in. We won't be doing any more feature work on the classic boards, so it is important to make sure that the teams that you're working with are moving on to the new boards so that they can get those new features. And this is where you can find it, and you'll also notice that on the classic boards now there's going to be a slight warning for the people who access them, just to let them know that we're no longer recommending these for new projects. If you're starting a new project, it's probably a good idea just to jump onto the new boards. So with all that new stuff there, what are we actually going to have to do here? When we come to building these new boards, there's a few things that we want to have a look at. So number one is that we've got a few changes. We've got no migration from the old boards to the new boards. We don't have a way to automatically upgrade them, for example. You'll actually have to build all new boards for the teams that you've got running Agile processes. So part of the reason is this, that we've removed a few features or changed a few features. One of them is hierarchies we've removed. Now we've removed those for various different reasons, but we can go into them individually if you want later on in the Q&A, but fundamentally that's not available on the new boards. Now what we can actually do instead is you could actually put together multiple separate boards to represent that. And we'll have a quick look at how the JIRA team's doing that later. We've also got a dedicated sprint field for Scrum teams, which is new because previously we were using the fixed version field, and the feedback that we got from a lot of customers is that they wanted to use their fixed version field as a fixed version field, which really makes a lot of sense. So we've built a dedicated sprint field, and with that, that means that the historical sprints will remain on the classic boards, and the new sprints will be on the new boards, because we don't have we don't have a migration path from the old to the new. And we do have Epic support coming soon. It's not currently available on the new boards. So in the meantime, people are approximating that with the use of labels. But we would recommend either holding out until later on this month when we've got that in labs, and then later on as a full feature. and sort of trying that if epics are a showstopper for you. So just before I move on to that, let me go on to a quick demo. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at what it's going to take to build ourselves a new board. So if we've got a new team that's starting a new project, or we've got an existing project that we've been running for a while, and we want to move into the new boards and start off with all this, we're going to try running through that process and see what they're going to face. So we'll just say that this is a Kanban team, because that's the simplest one. Now the Scrum process is very much the same. There's just obviously a slightly different view that you've got for the start there, and we've obviously got sprints and stuff like that. But in the meantime, let's have a look at the Kanban process. So we can start by creating one for our Avengers team, and we'll just pull in the projects that are necessary for this, because previously, you know, we would have had to do this on a project-specific basis. But now let's just grab all the relevant projects that we need and bring them all together. And we'll end up with a board straight away that's going to put all those issues together for us. And they're actually, you can see right now, these boards, these projects and issues are actually interspersed, and we can rank against each other and actually get them mixed right in with each other in a way that we previously weren't able to on the classic boards. So how's this working in the background? If we actually have a look under our filters, because I've just created that, I've got a new filter here. And this is actually automatically created by GreenHopper. It's quite simple. It's just asking me for, the filter just asks for a series of projects, and then it automatically orders by rank. Now the rank field will let you do that drag and drop that I just did a moment ago and rank issues against each other. If you want to order it by a different field, then that's certainly possible. You could order by updated date or created date or anything like that. But in order to have ranking on the boards, then it needs to be ordered by the rank field. So from here, we've actually got, on top of the filter, we've actually got the permissions for the board are inherited from that filter. So if we go back a step, we can actually see that in this particular one, if we go for editing it, we'll be able to see that it's shared with anyone that has permission to view these projects. So anyone that can look at the various different projects that make up the Avengers team can now have a look at this particular board. Again, the traditional JIRA permissions do apply. So if you've got a person that has permission to project A but not project B, they'll be able to see the filter, they'll be able to see the board, but they won't be able to see the individual issues that they don't have permission to see. So from there, we actually have not just the issues represented there, but we actually get our charts as well. So if we go over to the reporting side, we can already see we've got charts built based on the data that we've already got here. We can double click to zoom out on the control chart, and we actually get this nice sort of view over time of what's been happening. We can hover and have a look at any of these issues. And then this particular data set is actually automatically generated data, so that's why we've got all the dots at the top and the bottom except for this particular one here. This interactivity lets us have a quick look at what's happened over time and get an idea of what the issues are and what's actually causing us problems. If we want to highlight a particular area, we just click and drag and it will zoom in on that for us. Again, we can also refine it further with filtering. We can look at certain columns, we can look at certain quick filters and have a bit of a narrowing down of the data that we're looking at there if we want to. From here, the other thing that we can do is we probably want to not just have that particular setup. We might want to customize the way we're looking at the data a lot more than that. By default, it will give you these two quick filters, which is just your recently updated issues and the issues assigned to yourself, and one swim lane, which is the expedite swim lane. So you can see all these issues at the top here are actually all blockers. If we fold that up, then we can see that below we've got all the minors and criticals and majors. We can actually customize that quite easily just by going to configure. We've got both swim lanes available, and these can be based on anything we want. Queries is the default that you get. So you could have anything that's got, I don't know, maybe something to do with aliens. So we could just say any issues that relate to aliens, pop that in there, and it will just promote those straight to the top now. Sorry, just refreshed it twice. So now you can see we've got those 46 alien issues promoted straight to the top. And again, we can ignore those and hide those away if we want to. It's very quick to rapidly build this, this kind of dynamic board that you can build and tune to your exact needs. It also is very quick to actually load. We've got, I think, a couple of, definitely several hundred issues on that board right now that we're looking at. Again, the quick filters are the same. They're based on JQL. Very quick to get in and change those. And this lets us basically go in and very quickly have this board set up. But one of the things that we're seeing a lot is as far as the column layout is going, if you've got a custom workflow, it's not going to look like this. Your traditional workflow will actually, this is, sorry, the JIRA default workflow, so we've only got those 5 statuses, but quite often if you've got a more complicated workflow, you'll find a series of unmapped statuses on the left-hand side. Now, next to each status, it's actually got a number, and that number is the issues that are currently in that status. If you're seeing a new board that doesn't show any issues on it, it's possibly because the statuses are unmapped and they're on the left-hand side here. And if you have a look at what we have there is that column just disappears completely, and we don't have any data in it. We don't see those issues, and we can't do anything about them. So that's one important thing to remember, is that the workflows will need to map directly to these columns. And one quick and easy way we can actually do that is we can have a look at the simplified workflow. So if you're an administrator dealing with a lot of different workflows, you might be quite frustrated with every change that has to come through, having to make sure that multiple projects are sharing the same ones, or multiple projects that are already sharing the same ones need to be split up when you need to customize one. So what we've enabled is a new simplified workflow mode. If you're a project administrator and the new board is actually using just exclusively one project, you'll be able to move across and migrate to the GreenHopper simplified workflow. What this allows you to actually do is to not just add columns, but also add statuses whenever you want. So we could actually say, let's add a new column, say in QA, and we'll throw this in there straight away for us. It's also created a new status for us right away. This means that we don't have to deal with the pain at the back end of dealing with these workflows. It also means that for people that really want a simple workflow, you don't have to worry about setting that up and teaching them the requirements there. On top of that, these workflows actually automatically allow you to transition from any status to another one. So you don't need to worry about setting up each of the individual statuses and transfers. It will just let you move them from wherever to another column immediately. Another thing we're quite often seeing is we're seeing in support a number of teams are putting together too many columns. So maybe they're having a post-QA session. Maybe they've got a pre-QA session as well. And then what we end up with is this mammoth board that has just too many statuses on it that really could be combined a fair bit. Now, what we might want to do in this kind of circumstance is, if you have a look at how the default one was, we actually had the done column was combining both resolved and closed statuses together. And when you have a look at it on the board, then you can see that moving an issue into that column will give you the option between those two different statuses. So one thing that we do always recommend is, if you've got a lot of statuses up there, a lot of columns up there, try and consolidate those as much as possible. It'll make it a lot simpler for you to find the data that you're after. But additionally, try and make sure that you've not got any unnecessary steps in there. One option we've also looked at is even splitting it off into 2 separate boards. You might want to use that filter, tweak it a little bit, make sure that you've got the first 3 columns on one board and the next 3 on another, for example. That's one option that we're looking at too. Okay, so with that, let's have a quick look at what we can do to cut down the data, or why we want to cut down that data. So just fire this one back up. Okay, so cutting up the workload. So we do have some upper limits of the new GreenHopper. We've always had upper limits, as I'm sure as administrators you're all aware, especially on the larger end of the scale. There's things that we need to be aware of. Now, these particular boards, they do handle up to 500 issues very nicely. What we found is that beyond 500 issues, we can still serve the data up, and JIRA doesn't tend to have that much of a problem pulling that data up. But what it does have an issue with is the actual client-side rendering. So it gets sent over to the client-side as a JSON bundle, at which point we then have to now draw 500 plus issues in using JavaScript and the browser's tools there. So if you've got a combination of slow machines and possibly browsers that don't do JavaScript quite as well, you might want to look at limiting the number of issues that people are looking at on their boards. Again, consider splitting it into 2 or more boards. You want to look at things like filtering out older issues that have not been updated in a while. You could even make a separate board to track those kinds of issues. But one of the things we quite often ask is how do we start cutting up that data? So let's have a quick look at how we can do a lot of that. Now we've got one board already here that is our mega board that we'll go through and just have a look at to start with. So we can see there are 96 stories, 250 blockers, 74 bugs, and then 1,000 of everything else. So we've got a lot of issues on this board. You know, that's nearly 1,500 issues right there. But the other thing that we can see is this team has actually put a lot of work in. They put in a lot of quick filters. They've put in a lot of swim lanes. It doesn't make a lot of sense for them to be doing both, I guess, to a degree. If you've got one team that is consistently using the board with that quick filter on all the time, perhaps what they should be doing is setting up a separate board that only looks at the data in that filter. If we look at this, we've got a much smaller board. We've actually only got 100 or so issues in the top 2 columns. Maybe that's all we need to look at. Again, you might want to look at the reporter that's actually looking at them. Rather than the project, you might want to look at who's reported these issues. You might want to look at how long it's been since they were updated. So let's take a quick look at that filter that's powering this one and see what we can do to narrow that down a bit. So we've got the filter here, and what we can see is, as before, someone's just taken a bunch of projects, thrown them together, and then ordered them by just by rank, which is the default behavior there. So what we probably want to do is narrow it down to maybe certain issue types. If we're not worried about subtasks in the grand scheme of things until it's down to the nitty-gritty, we could maybe remove those from our board. If we're not worried about particular things like technical tasks or documentation tasks, we could remove those as well. We might only be worried about particular components as well. But what we've got here is I've got some sample JQL to swap that around with, so we'll just throw that in and have a quick look at it. So we've still got the same projects. But then we're also looking for, within those projects, we're looking for only certain issue types. Only the issue types that are going to be relevant to the work that we're doing here. Support requests are not going to make any sense here, so we're going to remove those. We're also looking for outside those projects. It's important to remember that we may want to bring in something that is actually unrelated from another project that we haven't already specified. We're looking at a few other things. So if the component is a global threat, anything to do with Shield or smashing things, then we want to bring those in. We want to have a look at those as well. But still, if it's been more than 60 days since the issue was created, we don't want to have a look at those. Now you could of course replace that with updated date or anything else that you've got there, maybe even a due date you want to look at as well. Basically it's going to be dependent on your data, but it's really important to remember that we've got a lot of power behind the JQL filter here, and we can really utilize that to narrow the data down that we're looking at. So if we go and do that search, we're going to drop from 1,500 issues to 385. If we now save the changes to that filter, that will be reflected immediately on that board. And what we can see is it's loading a lot faster and we've got a lot less issues. We still have a lot in the top there, especially in the story section. So maybe what we want to do is we want to now rethink what we're doing with those swim lanes, because the swim lanes are designed to promote issues right to the top. And let's have a look at what we can do here. So one important thing that we probably want to look at is anything that is a global threat. So that sounds pretty serious, so let's have a look at those. And we probably also, we've already got the quick filter for my issue. And we've got a lot of other ones here, but we could probably also look at the ones that are reported by me, because I know that I report pretty good issues. If I can type. So what we'll do now is we'll go back to that board. And I should have actually, sorry, 1 second, moved my swim lane to the top. I don't have any to go through it. Oh, that's upsetting. Well, what we can do is we can actually quickly look at, sorry about that, we can look at the issues that were reported by me and immediately see that we've got some much more relevant data to us right now. We can actually see fewer issues. We can see immediately the clarity of the card colors showing up there, indicating to us what type of issue they are. And it's actually a lot clearer because we've got less data to show right away. On top of that, with less data being shown, we've actually got JIRA having to pull up less data and trying to sort less data, which of course is going to be great for the instance on the back end. And finally, what we might also want to do is we've got a lot of those columns here, so we probably want to look at consolidating those columns a bit. Let's maybe just move them back to how it used to be. Remove that resolved one. If we remove a column whilst it's got a status in there, that status is just going to be returned over to the left-hand side here. So that's a safe thing to do as well, so we can move that in there and consolidate what we've got, refocus that work, and look at just the basic quick data that we've got there. And finally, the last piece that we want to look at is with the Kanban boards especially, we've got this sub-filter. So if we look over at the filter side, we can actually modify the filter we're using to power this particular board. We can look at the way that's currently shared. We can look at the details of it. But also we can see the work sub-filter. Now what this actually means is that when we put issues up on this board, we assume that if they've already got a fixed version and that fixed version has actually been released, then we no longer need to worry about that. If it's already fixed and that version is released, then we shouldn't necessarily need to be looking at this issue. Now this of course could mean something different to you guys, so you could customize this filter to anything you need. But this is a good way to reduce the data that you've got there. If we look back on that board now, we've actually got a lot of issues in that done column. If we hit the release button and put in our release number and move it out of there, it'll actually take all those issues, it's a couple hundred issues it's got there, and it's going to move them out of this board, attach the fixed version to them, and then release version 1.0. So that once that's done, we end up with even less issues than before. Now this again is just going to help JIRA in terms of the data that's needing to pull up and serve, because it not only grabs the issue key, but it also grabs details. As you can see, all this data here, the avatars, the length of time it's been in that status, it's grabbing a lot of info there. So the smaller number of issues we can grab, the better for it. And let's go on to upgrading. Okay, so we know what's available there now, what we can do with these boards, rather than having to deal with these behemoth projects and deal with them quite within these really restricted ways. We can actually get quite flexible with those new boards and really focus it down to smaller teams and smaller focus points. So how do we actually get onto that? And that's going to be dependent on where you are right now. If you're currently on an instance running JIRA 4.4 or below, then there's a couple of things that we're going to need to run through. If you're already on 5.0 or 5.1, then it's fantastic. You probably just need to run, go and look at grabbing GreenHopper 6.0. But there's also some things that we'd like to make you, I guess, aware of in case you are on an earlier version or are going to upgrade another older instance. So we would recommend running JIRA 5x. GreenHopper 6.0 is only compatible with 5x, so that's one point there that's going to help you. We would recommend 5.1 or higher if possible, especially if you're on a large instance. We've got a lot of performance improvements for large instances in 5.1. We'd recommend GreenHopper 6.0. A lot of the stuff that I've demoed today is only available in 6.0 or higher. There is no downgrade path available for any of our products, really. So it's important to remember that once we do run an upgrade, you're on that version. And this is a key thing that we want to sort of remind people about, because if you just click on the upgrade button within the Universal Plugin Manager, it's going to be quite easy to get that upgrade done, but then if for whatever reason the decision is made that that's not what you want, then we don't have any way to restore your data to the earlier version without going back to a previous backup. And so because of that, we'd recommend actually testing the upgrade as though it's a JIRA upgrade. Now, obviously, we don't want you to go to the full, stringent details such as, testing your customizations and everything like that. But if you can set up a test instance and maybe get your key stakeholders involved in just checking out that everything that they use on a day-to-day basis is fine on the newer GreenHoppers before they actually, pull the trigger and upgrade in the production instance, then that would be ideal. Especially if you're moving from GreenHopper 5.7 or lower up to 6.0, then we would hugely recommend that you do this on a test instance first. Part of what we've done is we've introduced a few different technologies to make these new boards, and a large part of it has meant database changes. So you probably heard about active objects, and they are powering everything behind the new boards. So the new board data is saved in active objects. The ranking field uses active objects exclusively. It's all pretty much reliant on this active objects feature working. If that doesn't work, then we're not going to have a lot of GreenHopper working at all. But active objects requires new permissions that JIRA previously never really used. So one example is sequences and triggers in Oracle. Now we've actually gone through and we've documented all the different database permissions that you'll need for these particular, for JIRA 5.0 and above, and for active objects to work. Now, if you look at the JIRA database guides for JIRA 5.0 or 5.1 or whichever version you're going to, it'll have in detail there what permissions you need for your database. But it is important to remember that you get those done before going ahead with the upgrade. Quite often we're seeing support cases coming through where active objects gets itself into a sticky situation because it doesn't have the permission to create those sequences and triggers. So we've got these new ranking fields. So let's have a quick look at what's going on with those new ranking fields. We had an old ranking type. It had this whole crazy optimization process in it that would bring larger instances to its knees. So what we did is we rebuilt that completely, and we introduced what we called the global rank field. So you may have previously had a field that looked like this. This is my ranking field, or it might have just been called rank. And then what you'll end up with after you upgrade past 5.7 onto 5.8 or higher, you'll find that you've got now two ranking fields. One of them will actually have the type global rank, and that will be the one that you'll want to use. The other one will actually be your old rank field, but we've converted it to be a number type, and we've renamed it to be obsolete. We leave that lying around there just in case you want to have any of the historical data, or you've got anything that's pulling data out of the database for that, just so that you're not losing any of that stuff. But fundamentally what we do is behind the scenes during that upgrade process, we replace any references to that field in your field configurations, your filters, anywhere that we were talking about my rank field previously. We'll now talk about the new global rank field called my rank. We also import all the data from the old rank field into the new one, which means that you should never have any sort of ranking field data loss. Now, of course, having said that, if the operation fails to do that upgrade, it will leave GreenHopper in an unworkable state. We'll actually have a blue banner that shows up. I intended to get a screenshot, but don't have it immediately. It'll show up saying that GreenHopper failed the upgrade task, and you'll actually, at that point, we recommend grabbing the Support Tools plugin and using that to scan the logs for any known issues. Now, you can just find that through the administration panel. It's under System, and then the Support Tools plugin. We've got a scanner there, and we've spent a lot of time actually looking at all the common issues that we were facing in support, and we've tagged them with knowledge base articles so that that Support Tools plugin can actually solve the majority of the issues that you'll actually see. Now, on top of that, still 99% of the issues that we're seeing were because of database permissions. Either active objects didn't have permissions to create new tables, or it didn't have permission to look at sequences and triggers, something like that, and we end up with a situation where it wasn't quite ready to import those new ranking fields into the active objects database. And of course, if you're going on to the new ranking field, we'd recommend using JIRA 5.0. We did have one particular issue in JIRA 4.4 where if you try and do an XML import, then it will forget to drop the active objects data before redoing that import, which can be quite bad. It means you can actually double up on data. There are a number of other small issues that we tied up throughout the course of the 4.4 bug fix releases, but we would recommend using JIRA 5.0 because that's had the most stable stuff put into it. It's also got, of course, the new stable API for Java plugins, which means that GreenHopper 6 will also work on 5.0 and 5.1. It'll be much easier for you to get the latest upgrades at that point. And the other thing to be aware of with the ranking field is it does have a permanent memory usage now. It's actually going to be permanently taking approximately 1 megabyte of heap space per 10,000 issues per rank field. Now, if you've got a lot of teams that are using separate rank fields and you've got a lot of issues, then it can add up quite quickly. So if you're looking at 100,000 issues in an instance and they're all ranked against 2 separate ranking fields, you're now looking at 20 megs of constant heap usage at that point. Now, it's important to remember that this is going to be a constant usage. It's going to pretty much be flatlining there, rather than the previous old rank field, which would use that optimizing process and spike up to crazy levels if you had more than about 15,000 issues to be re-ranked or optimized. Finally, the workload cache, if you've had a look at our presentations from Summit, especially scaling beyond 300,000 issues, the workload cache was mentioned in that one, and we will continue to use the workload cache for the classic boards. So if you still have teams using the classic boards, then continue to use this workload cache as normal. Don't feel that we can just drop it immediately or increase it immediately. Continue to monitor it the same way that you would currently. But it is no longer used by those new boards. So once your entire teams move, all of your teams move over to the new boards, you can actually start reducing that workload cache to much smaller levels so that you're no longer using it. And it's only going to be used by those classic boards. So people going back to the old charts, back to the old stuff, those are the only people that are going to trigger the workload cache to be built now. So the Atlassian way, how are we using GreenHopper internally? So I've picked 2 sample teams just to show you 2 of the problems that 2 of the biggest questions that we face in support about how we're using it internally. And the first one is our JIRA team. So our JIRA team is our biggest development team that we've got. And we actually have, within that, we have multiple smaller teams. So these teams are anywhere between 2 and 5 people, and they all tackle different themes of the product. We actually use a separate board for each of those separate teams, but the entire JIRA dev team, the whole team together, all those smaller teams work together on the same iterations. So we actually use one sort of monolithic giant board that only looks at the stories and doesn't look at the smaller parts of those stories, doesn't look at the subtasks or anything like that. It just looks at the larger components. And we use swim lanes to see all the work from all the teams. So we can see, we've got the archiving team, we've got the ecosystem team, we've got the engineering, health, and enterprise scale teams, and they've each got their own issues that they're working on. Our product managers can at any time dive in, unfold those swim lanes, or have a look at them all separately, see who's got the most work done, see who's going to need some more work doing, and sort of based on that determine where they're going to put the next amount of, who's going to be the next target for shiny new features that the PMs want built. On the other hand, we've got our support team. So our support team is quite a large team. We're 120 people globally, and we're using a mixture of sort of non-agile methods and Kanban methods within our support team. So what we're actually doing is we're using swim lanes to promote issues above the other issues. A lot of what we do in support is about making sure that we're prioritizing these issues very, very accurately. Part of that is, of course, as you guys know, as enterprise customers, if you've got an instance down, we want to make sure we're answering that immediately. So we use quick filters to focus on certain areas, but we primarily use swim lanes. And here's a sort of a glance at what we're doing with the swim lanes there. We've got all our level 1s that are not waiting on customers, the level 1s that are waiting on us. go to the top. And it doesn't matter if they've got someone looking at it or not already, we make sure that they're on the top. If we've got a level 1, and even if some other guy is already handling it, I want to make sure that I can see it. After that, we have all our unassigned issues. So the issues that don't have any attention on them just yet, we look at those next. In addition to that, we've also grabbed the escalated issues. So anyone that's not quite happy with their current assignee, or it's taking too long, those get thrown up there. But they don't get thrown up beyond the level 1s. From there, we get our enterprise level customers, or the ones with enterprise licenses. And then from there, we have our the rest of the unassigned issues. So this is the stuff that is not so critical to us, but does need someone to look at immediately, or not immediately, by the end of the day. And then after that, we can see we've got Ivan swim lane. Now this is just the start of all our different assignees that we get. Now, what that means is if we have no level 1s in the queue, that swim lane, as we saw earlier in the demo, will not appear there at all. So it lets us focus on just the top lane there. So whatever's right at the top, we know is the most important thing for us to look at. In addition to this, what we're actually doing is we're filtering the boards based on a combination of time zone and assignees. So if you look at the, I haven't actually got the demo here, but if we look at our raw filter for it, it's actually about 4 or 5 lines long of JQL, but it includes all the different time zones for different customers per region. So that, for example, the SF team can focus on the SF customers, and the Sydney team can focus on the APAC customers. But then in addition to that, we bring in things separately. So a level 1 needs to be brought in regardless of the time zone. So we can bring that in separately with JQL. Escalated issues the same. So based on that, we get a lot of power over what we're looking at. We get to force all the important stuff right to the top, and really just be able to look at whatever's in that top lane and have a look at that one first. So as a quick summary, we want to, going back through what we've had a look at today, we want to make sure that this new GreenHopper means that we're thinking in a new way. The new boards take a slightly different approach. We're no longer building them out of the box for you based on a project, so it will mean that you need to put a bit of thought into it, or even hand that thought down onto the project administrators that you've got. Using the simplified workflow means you can put more power into their hands in terms of those kind of changes, and also relieve a bit of your work in terms of dealing with workflows. You can also use this to actually help these teams enable better Agile practices. It's really designed around making it the ultimate Agile tool, and just making it an even better Agile tool than we've ever been before. We also want to make sure that any boards that you're building have a purpose. One thing we consistently see here in support is we see these really nice looking, really big new boards, but we're not quite sure what the purpose of them is, and they seem to really be about letting 4 different teams individually look at all the same issues and not really have a great focus to them. So once you've got a purpose to it, make sure you're focusing that data to that particular point. This will allow you to have smaller data loads that will allow the JIRA instance to serve up that data faster, and not have as many issues in terms of the scaling that we've traditionally had with these GreenHopper projects. And finally, treat the upgrades to GreenHopper almost as if they are JIRA upgrades. It is quite important because we do run upgrade tasks in GreenHopper on the data, especially if you're going from 5.7 or earlier to the latest versions. It's incredibly important that you do test it like it is a JIRA upgrade. Having said that, I'll turn it back over to Morgan for questions if you guys have any. I'm not sure if he's collated them already or not, but I'll turn it back to him now.
Sounds great. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. If you guys have questions, go ahead and chat them in, and I'll go ahead and get started. First, I wanted to just share the poll results. So 67% of the people that took the poll said that they had under 50,000 issues. 20% said they had 150,000 to 500,000 issues, and then 13% said they had 500,000 and plus issues. That just gives us a little idea of who is attending the webinar. And with that, I guess you did comment, Chris, on cutting up your workload. Is cutting up your workload effectively one of the most common issues you've seen in support for enterprise customers?
Definitely, definitely. So with the, I guess with the power and the multi-project aspect, what we're seeing is people just throw in every single project that they can and try and put it on the same board. And I'm guilty of doing the same thing too. When I first saw the new boards, I thought this will be great, and I got GreenHopper installed on our support instance, on the QA version of our support instance, thankfully not on the production one. And I immediately tried to build a behemoth board that had every single support team in there and every single geo, and we'd have 8 million different quick filters and 100 different swim lanes for every different scenario possible. But it was taking, at that point, nearly a minute to load the data. And then once, of course, you've got a minute of JSON sort of compiling and sent over the wire, then you've got to render that on the poor screen, and that took quite some time. So it's definitely a mistake that we see happening a lot in terms of this misunderstanding of how big a board should be. Thankfully, because the data we're hitting is mostly in the indexes, we don't have that much of a performance hit. It's mostly like hitting the issue Navigator and doing that kind of a search. But still, it just means that it's perceived to be a lot slower because we can actually see people spending more time rendering it in the browser than actually pulling that data up. But also, there's no real point to that. If you've got 500 issues, how do you know which one is an important one? And really, that's the big question that we want to make sure that you're focusing on with these boards, is focusing it down to the issues that you need to see, rather than every man and his dog.
Okay. I guess this is kind of related. Of all the support issues coming through to Atlassian support regarding GreenHopper, would you be able to remember what sort of the largest GreenHopper instance that you've seen come through support? If you could recall what the issue was and what the support team learned from that case.
The largest one I've seen would be quite a while ago. That this is one that's sort of sticking in memory, and especially with the ranking field. It was before the new boards were available, and it was, I believe, a 700,000 issue instance. Now, what was happening with them is they were running into GC overhead problems because essentially we were running an optimization of the old rank field on their rank data, and they had nearly 20,000 issues in one project, and it just couldn't handle that much data and would chew up quite literally gigabytes of heap in order to run that optimization. Now, this same sort of data set, I remember checking in on them quite some time later once we'd figured out what the problem was, and we'd had to split up a project and sort of narrow that data down within their projects. And of course, with the old boards, when you split up a project, you can no longer look at the data together. You have to have two separate boards for that as well. But we checked in on them a while later once we'd gotten the new boards out, and I think they'd been able to shave about half of their heap off, basically cut it down from I think 20-something gig to half that quite easily, just because of the ranking field changes. So we've definitely seen some good stuff with the new boards, but I haven't really had a behemoth instance like that burns in my memory since then.
Okay. And do you have any comments on what features are in the works for helping GreenHopper Enterprise customers moving forward from here?
So I don't have an immediate idea of what would be specific to the enterprise, but I know the biggest feature we keep seeing asked for is epics. And on top of that, sometimes people aren't asking for it, but they're looking for the epic feature, and they're trying to emulate it with other systems and not quite getting there. So we're seeing people do strange things with subtasks instead of treating subtasks as stories and then treating stories as epics, just to sort of try and get that issue linking going. Now we are working quite hard on getting the epic stuff out there, but I think the current roadmap is basically epics, and then making GreenHopper smarter in terms of helping the project managers and project admins, and project leads rather, just making sure that they can get their work done and organized in a way that makes sense. We're continuously working though on making everything as fast as possible. I know recently we started gzipping the data that gets sent across just to make that even faster and make that quicker, and we've had continuous improvements to the way that the rendering is done on the client side as well.
All right. Here's a question that popped in. What can you talk about regarding multiple sprints in Scrum? Previous versions were allowing only one active sprint.
So we do now have multiple sprint support. One thing that is quite interesting about the sprint field is that it is a global sprint field as well. So for example, if we had a look at our boards before and we had maybe one board set up for Iron Man and another one set up for Thor, and then we had a third board set up that included both Iron Man and Thor, what we'd actually find is by creating a sprint on the combined board is we'd be able to see that same sprint on the two individual boards separately. So yes, we do have multiple sprints. We also now store the ranking of that sprint in the database as well. So if you've got two people working remotely and they want to sort of rank or suggest and plan out these sprints, then they can actually do that with each other. Those sprints will actually be shared based on the issues that are located within that filter. So if you find that you've got two people that are getting multiple sprints on the board and are not quite understanding where the other sprints are coming from, then you might find that what's actually happening there is we've got the multiple sprints happening because one team is creating them on one board, the other team is creating them on a second one. Because of that global nature of them. So that can be quite powerful in regards to especially multiple teams and running multiple sprints, but it is something to be aware of. You probably want to make sure that your filters are tight enough to make sure that you're not dragging in unnecessary data. But we've worked hard. We put out, I think, multiple sprints with 6.0, or maybe it was just a slightly more recent one than that, but it's definitely there in the latest 6.0.4.
All right. And another question, if people out there need support, if an enterprise customer has an issue with GreenHopper 6.0 and needs to submit a support issue, are there certain things that you need in order to help them resolve their issue more quickly?
One of the things that we've found with GreenHopper is it's hugely data dependent. With standard JIRA issues, it's a lot easier to replicate them than it is for GreenHopper. Now, GreenHopper is, especially when it comes to things like the burn down charts, it relies on not just data that is there, but also data that has been there for quite some time and has been worked on over time. So one thing that we do really appreciate is whenever possible, and I know this gets very difficult with the larger instances, it is being able to either look at that data ourselves or getting it back up. I suppose one thing, especially if we're looking at things with burn down charts, or you're looking at the reporting side of things, and you want to know what's going on here or there, we want to look at as much data as possible that is actually from your instance. So if that means doing screen shares or getting XML backups, then that's what we'd like. But ultimately, if you go to the Support Tools plugin and grab the support zip, that's pretty much what we want right there, and as well as lots of pretty pictures and descriptions. As long as we've got a support zip, we'll ask you for the rest as needed, but I suppose be prepared for a screen share or an XML backup request.
All right. Well, with that, those are all the questions we had. So, Chris, I want to thank you for your time. I do want to thank everyone for hanging in there, even though we were about 10 minutes late. Here's some information that you guys can use. If you want to reach me, you can reach me at webinars@atlassian.com. Up there is Chris's email as well, and like I said, hopefully we'll get this recording up on Atlassian TV pretty soon. There was a question that just popped in, but I'll go ahead and just email that to Chris directly so he can reply back. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their time. We've already gone over, and Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.